Welcome to the Daily Bitcoin Podcast, where knowledge meets financial freedom. We're here to break down the world of Bitcoin. No fluff, no hype, just real talk about how this digital asset is reshaping the future of money.
Let me see if it goes. There we go. Okay, so we're live with Thomas. Is it Jeegers? How do you say that? Jeegers?
In every language, you would pronounce it differently. I guess originally it came from the south of the Netherlands, where you would say Jeegers. But just call me Thomas. Just go with Thomas.
Thomas. Okay, we'll stick with that. I'm the same way. My last name's LeBlanc, and people say it LeBlanc, but It's French for the white. So anyway, I get the same treatment. Not quite as bad as yours, though. I guess Americans will butcher names with the best of them. Okay, so let me see if I can share the link. I'll go ahead and share this link if you want to post it. Let's see, send link. Well, what's your X handle?
My name, literally, Thomas Jeegers in one word.
Oh, here we go. It always takes me a second to do this one.
Good. That's an easy handle because there are not many people with my last name.
All right, there's a link to the live broadcast if you want to share the link on your side. That way, people that follow you.
Yeah, I will share afterwards.
Okay. All right. So this is Craig LeBlanc, the doorman. I've been taking a break from X for a while. I think it's been, it seems like an eternity. I think it's only been like a month, really, since the Nashville convention. But I met Thomas in Miami. We were both standing on the beach, pondering the universe next to one another. And on the way off the beach, we just connected and started a great conversation and went and had lunch. And really, the conversations kind of never stopped. So he's the author of a book that he's going to tell us about. But first, he's going to tell us a little bit about his history, past, where he came from. And we'll get to know who Thomas is and why he wrote this book. So Thomas, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. Well, thank you for having me, Craig. Pleasure being here. So gladly a little bit about my past. As a teenager, growing up in Brussels, Belgium, at the heart of Europe, I went through several phases, but always distinctively punctuated by one same characteristics of always going all in and with full dedication, oftentimes borderline obsession. Up to my most recent one, Bitcoin. But before we get there, so when I was, my first obsession was probably when I was a teenager, as going fully into video games. When I turned 16, I realized that wouldn't bring me anywhere. So I decided.
What was the video game?
Warcraft 3, Counter-Strike, version 1.5, so I'm revealing my age with that. And that's one of the early ones.
Is that kind of the Command and Conquer version? Well, that's the early one, or is it the later ones where you teamed up and you went on missions?
No, it was later, so already in teams. It was 2005, around that time. Anyway, but already I was, trying to take things very seriously. When I remember playing Warcraft 3, I remember timing myself for building different structures and building a strategy to see what was the optimal strategy. So literally spending hours trying to develop the optimal way of doing things. Something that honestly nobody I knew was doing. People were just playing, having fun, and I was just trying to find the best way of doing things. And that approach stayed with me for a long time. So when I decided to move on from that, because I realized that wouldn't take me anywhere, I moved into English boxing. And so in parallel to school, I was literally every day I had training. Up until just before my 18th birthday, I boxed in the final of the Belgian Championship. I won the introductory match there, so really glad of having made that happen, and then left that completely behind me to start university. So I started in economics in Belgium still, and there I quickly discovered a passion for understanding what made people tick. So what gives incentives to people. And one of the ultimate incentives is money. How money flowing through an economy is really guiding what people don't, how they save, how they work, the family they made, they build, and so on. So that was really something that I realized was my thing. So that stayed with me. In parallel to that, I studied computer science. Again, personal interest. I was a bit of a geek at the time. And are you still there?
Here. Yeah.
Okay,
I
because you
the
disappeared from the video. There you are. All right.
Yep.
Yeah, when I finished my bachelor, I went for 2 different master's degrees in parallel in 2 different universities, so both in economics. That went really well. I got, actually awards for each of them. And one of the 2 was an award for the best master's thesis of Belgium in finance. That was organized by a major bank in Belgium. So it's a Dutch bank called ING, one of the biggest in the world, actually. And after winning that, they offered me a job. So I was like, well, it's great that you're offering me a place in your talent program in Belgium, but I really would like to go somewhere else. So travel the world, learn a new language. So I asked them whether they would have a spot in Austria. So Austria, where my girlfriend at the time, who is my wife today, was based. And so I started as an intern there. I was barely speaking any German, which was my 5th language, but somehow I managed to go through that internship fully in German, then moved to Frankfurt, Germany, so to do this talent program for which I was selected after all, but again, continuing in Germany. So learning everything about banking, about so going deeper in the topic of economics, banking, how incentive work, how people react to interest rates, saving and lending money. So that was really the one thing where I felt like I don't know whether you say that in English, like a fish in the water. I was in my element.
Right. That was correct. Correct analogy. Fish in the water.
And after a few years, decided to do several advanced financial certifications. So that's the letters that you will see after my name in on my LinkedIn profile and so on. CFA, FRM. So a few hundreds of hours of study. So every morning, every evening, every weekend, every holiday, for literally years of my life, in order to get to the level of knowledge and the quantity of letters that I managed to gather after my name.
The big one is FRM. Is that the hardest one to get? Or the most
it's probably CFA, the toughest one. So CFA is known as let's say the gold standard in the financial economy. They say it's the most looked after certification on Wall Street. So that was like 3.5 years of my life. Actually, most of the books you can see up there behind me, that's still the book for the CFA program.
Wow.
As soon as I was done with that, as I mentioned, I did the Financial Risk Manager, FRM. And as soon as I was done with that, I applied to top MBA programs. So Harvard, Stanford, INSEAD. Then when I got accepted by INSEAD, which was #1 MBA program in the world at the time, I was like, okay, that's it for that phase of life. So I quit at ING, moved to Singapore, and started my MBA there. Luckily I have a wife that was very understanding, willing to relocate with me multiple times. So we actually lived together in 6 different countries.
Which was your
And,
favorite?
oof. Um, Probably Vienna, where I am now, and then Frankfurt, where I spent maybe 3 years in total.
Why do you say that? What do you like most about them? Just the culture or the scenery or how old the cities are? Because those are both pretty old cities, pretty old
Well,
areas.
yeah, well, other cities where I've lived include Paris, London, Brussels, and Amsterdam, which are probably even older, and not than Vienna, but more than
Yeah.
Frankfurt. Um, I really like both Frankfurt and Vienna because they are well organized. This is just culturally what fits to me. People are on time. Things are working. Things are efficient, and that's basically reflects rather well how I like to work. I'm not so much the kind of person who will be just changing plans at the last minute and not having any schedule or anything. It's quite the opposite. I like knowing exactly what I will do every day of the year, a year ahead, and following a very strict plan to the letter. So really, really enjoy that.
In Amsterdam, around that area.
Yeah, Amsterdam was okay. I was okay. I spent 6 months there, the head office of ING. That was okay. 6 months was enough though.
It
Yeah.
was is how is Amsterdam as a place? Is it too crazy? Is it one of like the party city areas or what?
Um, if you want to party, you will find place to party in basically any of the cities I've mentioned. So, and at the end of the day, you can only go to one party at a time. So it doesn't matter whether there's, only 3 clubs in the city or 3,000 clubs, you can only go at one at a time. So
Mm.
yeah, if you want to party, you will find places. And I did enjoy my fair share of partying and enjoying nightlife in each of these places. Um, yeah, but I've had my time until let's say my mid 20s, and then decided to move on and pursue other interests of mine.
Right. So now you're finished with your. Do you need any more letters behind your name? Or are you done with that part of your life?
I think that's good for now. I mean, now I'm at the stage where if I add any more letter, it needs to go to a second line. So I I think that's enough for now.
That's it.
I was considering a PhD for a while, but yeah, I really changed my mind on that. So now I'm a lot more into trying to get the practical experience and making a real change in the world.
Yeah. You said something all the way back to when you talked about video games, and I did the same thing here. I used to time how fast I could build certain structures and then repeat it. And if I could get through this cycle time quicker, I could always outpace and have more resources and more men than all of my competitors. And I've actually brought that into business with me, how I really compartmentalize. I find patterns and then I find ways to simplify and make them quicker and quicker. And that's how we can scale up different markets. And I still use that to that day. And a lot of times I'll be thinking real time today, all the way back to when I was building my little Warcraft village and I had more villagers go and get gold and iron and stuff. It's amazing how all that it feels the same. I just feel like I'm doing an adult version of Warcraft
That's
in life
exactly it. That's exactly
sometimes. Um, all right. So now what do you, where are you today? Or have we sufficiently covered? Wait, let's go back to your childhood. Like, are you only child or you have siblings or tell me about
it.
your parents and stuff.
So second child, I have an older brother. He also went into finance ultimately. He's now in a private equity. My parents are somewhat related to, let's say, commercial or finance. My mom was an auditor her entire life. My dad was, buying and selling stuff, whatever he could find, one business at a time, and went well for him as well. So I never had to complain or never had to wonder whether I would have food on the table at the end of the day. So I had a, let's say, lucky childhood in that sense, and that enabled me to focus on whatever I decided to put my mind to, be it, the video game, the boxing, or the geeking around with some computer science stuff.
Wow. Okay. So that was your childhood, and then of course you went into the boxing and stuff that gave you all the competitiveness. You still seem to have that competitiveness all the way from gaming and boxing and schooling, and I guess you bring that into your business as well.
Yeah, that never left me, for better or worse. Sometimes probably a little bit even too competitive, but that did help me for achieving many things of which I'm proud. So really glad about that. For example, just before doing my MBA, I decided I had a few months. So from the moment I was accepted to the moment I knew I would move to Singapore, I had like 6 months, and I decided, okay, let's do some real sport challenge that will really bring me one step further in my own development. And I decided to go for a full Ironman. The long distance triathlon.
Okay.
So and within 6 months I went from barely doing any sport to finishing the full Ironman European Championship. I took quite
That's
some
smart.
risk, so I would not recommend anybody to try to do it that fast. I took quite some risk with my own health with that, but luckily it went perfectly well. Did not injure myself, did not get sick, so luckily that went well, and I still have a very big medal on my wall that I'm proud of.
I bet so. That's like a Mount Everest for endurance races.
That's about that, yeah. I think, yeah, about that.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's maybe transition into this book that you wrote, because I
Mhm.
know you discovered Bitcoin, and the way you, at least how you told me, you said the best way for you to, I guess, learn something is to write a book about it, or really, that was your logic. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, it was about that. So, at the bank, I was already the local expert on blockchain technology for ING in Germany. So already in 2014, I was a bit into the topic, which matched well, halfway between economics and computer science. But then in 2021, when I looked at the topic of Bitcoin again and everything that was being built around it, I realized how the world had changed compared to the 2014, 2015. How much Bitcoin had become something a lot more serious, in the sense it was not just a ultra risky investment or ultra risky bet on the future or geek tool. It really became a proper financial instrument with proper characteristics. It basically became unbreakable, uncensorable, and that's only when I realized that Bitcoin is gonna be a real big deal.
And what year
I,
was this when you
so
discovered?
2021,
Mhm.
2021, after my son was born. So it was literally my few weeks after he was born that I took a few weeks off to help my wife take care of him, and that's when in the free time when he was playing around, I was reading, and then got one book on the topic, and then another one, and then another one, and yeah, I quickly couldn't get enough of it, and
What
started
were some
listening
of the
to
early
podcasts.
books?
Hmm.
What were some of the early books and authors that as you started going down the rabbit hole? Are there any that stand out?
Yeah, there's one in particular. The one that really clicked for me was the book Crypto Assets by Burnisk and Tatar. I think it was the second most sold book on Bitcoin slash crypto asset at the time, right after Saifeddin's book, The Bitcoin Standard. Um, and that book, Crypto Asset, really echoed with me because it was written by people in finance, for people in finance, talking about Sharpe ratios and, using really the language that I spoke and the language that really talked to my heart. And I realized, okay, now that really is becoming something serious.
Okay, I remember in an early show, and I don't know if when I started the Bitcoin Daily Show, I was the guy that knew least about Bitcoin, and that's similar to you. I was like, if I start a show about Bitcoin, I will learn very fast what Bitcoin is. And the Bitcoiners came from the community and started to correct all of my kindergarten answers that people would ask. One of them was Sharpe Ratio, and I asked everybody, can somebody explain what the Sharpe Ratio is? And I never really did get a good answer. So I figured you might be the guy to explain that if you could for the audience.
Happy to. So the Sharpe Ratio basically gives you, well, as the name indicates, a ratio between risk and return. In particular, it's how much excess return you get compared to the risk you are taking. So you could, let's say, if you hold cash, you have no risk. If you have $1,000 today, you will have $1,000 next year. There's zero risk, but there is also zero return. If you invest in let's say the S&P 500, well, you take a little bit of risk. Typically, risk is measured as volatility, but you hope to have more than $1,000 next year, and typically it has been the case with the S&P 500 growing on average 7% a year, basically since World War II. And so you will, with the Sharpe Ratio, you are able to compare assets that have different risk profiles. So is it better to invest in a highly risky tech company that could bring you enormous return, or to invest in a very established, utilities or consumer goods company that will provide you a decent return every year with very low volatility, and you are sure that you will get that return. So these two investments are massively different, and if you just look at returns, you can compare them. So the Sharpe Ratio enables you to kind of scale the high return compared to the risk. That's why it's useful.
Now, do they have a way to integrate how the loss of purchasing power by holding the dollar, is that part of the calculation or no?
So that's the thing. The Sharpe Ratio is part of the traditional finance world, in which, and I can say that because I think I've studied quite a lot of finance for basically the last 15 years of my life. So traditional finance barely ever talk about the loss of purchasing power. Well, you know that €1 tomorrow will be worth less than €1 today, but they do not show you the full extent of how fast the US dollar is losing its purchasing power, or US dollar. It's the same with every other fiat currency. Actually, US dollar is even the one that is losing its value the slowest compared to all the other major fiat currencies. So you could, that's the thing, if you express your returns in US dollar, well, if both of the metrics you are comparing are in US dollars, you can compare them. But it's still not taking into consideration that even if you're making 7% profit a year in US dollar terms, well, if they printed 10% more dollars that year, and therefore the US dollar lost 10% of its purchasing power, well, you're still worse off than if you had spent the money last year.
So is there a way also for it to express a longer investment horizon, or is it more of a snapshot in time?
So it's over a period. If you're talking about return and risk, it's over a period, typically 1 year, 5 years. But again, it's really only comparative metrics. So you want to know whether your Sharpe ratio of investment A is better than Sharpe ratio of investment B, and see which one is more worth it. But again, it's not painting the full picture. There's no single risk metric or return metric that will give you the full picture. You need to take a lot of stuff into consideration. You take, of course, return, risk, but also time horizon, your tax rate for different types of investments, legal requirements, any other liquidity requirement, for example, or any other unique requirements that you would have as an investor. So you need to take a lot of different things into consideration to be able to assess whether an investment is indeed the most appropriate one for you.
So how do you calculate a Sharpe ratio for Bitcoin
then? So Sharpe ratio is always excess return compared to excess risk. So excess return, so meaning comparison to a benchmark. So in the book I wrote, I take a 10-year horizon, and I say, okay, let's say your benchmark is, for example, S&P 500, 7% average return. Bitcoin, I forgot the exact figure, but let's say it's growing 100% a year on average. Therefore, that's 93% excess return. But volatility is also much higher than that of the S&P 500. So let's say volatility is maybe 20% higher than that of the S&P 500, and therefore the ratio of the two, the 93% divided by 20%, gives you your Sharpe ratio. Don't take the figures I just mentioned as facts. That was just as an example. I don't know them by heart. They're all in the book in my chapter 4 on this topic.
I wonder, do you have to say that? Do you have to get before you speak? Do you have to give these kind of ask? I am not a financial advisor, or can you actually say, to some degree, you are a financial advisor?
So technically, I'm not a financial advisor. You need to have specific, specific authorization for that. So I do have the background. I studied whatever is needed to become a financial advisor, but I'm technically not a financial advisor. And yes, it's always best to make disclosures. I know in the US, you guys like to do that a lot because it's much easier to sue people in the US than in any other place. In Europe, people don't sue anybody else just out of the blue for any reason. So it's not as needed to say it. But since this is also shown in the US, I will gladly make the disclaimer. This is purely for educational purposes. And blah, blah, blah. I'm not a financial advisor. Make your own research.
Right. He's only the CFO of a major company, two major companies, because you came out of the not the healthcare industry.
I spent the last 5 years at a major healthcare company called GSK. In particular, the last 4.5 years I was the country head of finance for the country of Austria in Central Europe. That was fine. I learned quite a lot about leading teams, about fully managing a P&L, about leading the strategy of a country. But after that time, it was also the moment for me to move on, go back to my real passion, so the real financial industry, and combine it with my new passion / obsession for Bitcoin. And as soon as the opportunity came up to join Relay, which is the biggest Bitcoin-only broker in Europe, I immediately seized the opportunity. That was 2 months ago. And for the last 2 months, I've been the CFO and COO of Relay.
Fantastic. And how are they doing as far as, so how big is so they're the largest Bitcoin only exchange in Europe. What are some of the others in comparison? How big are they?
If you take the other 3 Bitcoin only brokers in Europe, you put them together, well, Relay is twice as big as all 3 together.
Wow. And how long have they been around?
Just 4 years.
Okay.
So,
picked you up as the CFO, the other one stepped down or moved on to bigger and better things, or?
Well, that's the thing. When you are a startup, especially based in Switzerland, when you are successful, your CFO are quickly noticed, and when you have a big bang offering them 3 times their salary, well, you cannot keep them. Now, I'm saying 3 times salary. I don't know the exact number, but I know that the last 2 CFOs have basically been hired by much bigger organization that can afford to pay a lot more than what a startup can offer, and that's why they decided to. It's reasonable to understand why they decided to move on. Even though I spoke to them, and they absolutely support Relay. They love the company. They had a great time there, and that also convinced me that even if the people leaving are saying so good stuff about the company, that's probably a very good sign, and the perfect step in for me.
Now, what makes them such a great company as far as where other companies might take risk, maybe they don't, or what is their kind of success recipe?
So Relay works on simple principles. So they want to be as simple and quick. So it must be simple and quick to be able to buy Bitcoin. Of course, a Bitcoin-only company, so they are not offering any of Ethereum or any other shitcoins. And Relay offers it in a self-custodial way. So you send euros or you send Swiss francs, and we send you Bitcoin directly to your own wallet. So either to a wallet that you own, or you can use the Relay app as a hot wallet to which you are the only one having the keys. We do not have customers' keys. So your keys, your coins, truly. So Relay live and breathe by the ethos of Bitcoin, making sure that Bitcoin are getting into as many hands as possible across Europe in the real way. So not, you don't want an exchange to have access to your Bitcoin. You don't want an institution to custody your Bitcoin for you. You really want people to be self-sovereign and have real control over their money.
Now, where does that come from? Is that just part of the founder's mission statement personally, or you kind of breathe that into the culture?
The two founders are, very strong Bitcoin-only believers, and therefore they have built the company this way and hired people accordingly. And I have to say, every day I'm quite amazed by the quality of the people with whom I'm working. They all live and breathe Bitcoin. Just last weekend there was the Baltic Honey Badger in Riga, so one of the big Bitcoin-only conference in Europe, and you have multiple of our employees just spending their free time there, hanging out with other Bitcoiners. That's what they do in their free time. That's what they do in their holiday. That's it's not just a job. What we hire is missionaries, not mercenaries. People are not just there to earn money. They are there because they know they are making something great for the world. They know that the mission matters, and this is really something fulfilling and something great to be part of.
Now, that's only who can you sell Bitcoin to? Just European or Americans, or where's your geographical boundaries?
Americans are out of line because there are some specific reporting requirement for what's called American person, so either who earns in the US or lives in the US and so on. So that's not in our scope yet. We focus on the European market. Most of our customers are in Germany, Switzerland, and then a bit in the countries around it. So Austria, Italy, France. But this is also due to the fact that so far we only have the Swiss license, so meaning we can proactively only market relay services only to Swiss people, and those who hear about it, it's only outside of Switzerland, it's only as a ripple effect. But from January onward, we are looking forward to having the European license, the new MiCA license. And from there on, we will be able to market proactively to all 400 million European people. So that will make quite a change to grow from a market of 8 million Switzerland to 400 something million for all of the EU.
And what's the timeline on that approximately?
So the MiCA license, which is the main European license for all of Europe, will only come into effect on the 1st of January 2025. And we expect to have the approval before that, so that as soon as the license comes into effect, we would be able to launch fully and to market across all of Europe.
Have that in Bitcoin or crypto space for Europe?
Sorry, say that again.
Does anyone else have that, or will we all be the first?
I know that there are others that are going for that license. I will not say that nobody will be earlier than us, because it's it does not come into effect before 1st of January. But there will probably be others that will be at the same time, even though I cannot tell you any name. I do not know for a fact, any other company that will have it. Now, I have to say, those are expectations so far. We are still, currently going through an audit to be able to have a stamp of approval for getting the French license, which is very similar to the MiCA European license. And as soon as we have the French license, we'll request to convert it to the European one. So those are expectations. I think it's perfectly reasonable to assume it will be approved, because I think we are compliant on everything that is required. And that will be quite a step for Relay.
Man, that's going to be huge. Now, do y'all ever coordinate, or do y'all ever talk to some of the other Bitcoin only exchanges like River or Strike or anything like that?
They are currently focusing on other markets. I know, some are trying to enter Europe slowly. I'm not fully familiar with exactly the pace at which they plan to enter Europe, but the business model is also quite different. As far as I do not know to which extent they are self-custodial, and I'm not sure that they offer the simplicity that Relay offers. So really, in a few clicks, in only a few seconds, you get from having euros to having Bitcoin in your own in your self-custody. So in a few seconds of clicking the app, and then it takes like a day to get the Bitcoin. But quite a good customer service, I have to say, and customer experience from beginning to end. So I'm really glad for.
Do y'all plan on long term? Do y'all plan on trying to go cover the whole planet, or let's just focus on Europe for now? Or what's the long term vision?
So progressively growing beyond Europe. So first, let's seize this enormous opportunity of the European Union market, then probably expanding to the neighboring places. So the UK, Turkey, Middle East. And I mean, by the time we have done that, I mean, we will probably have figured out the next steps. But for now, it's always making sure that we have an amazing product that is not only satisfying expectations of customers, but really impressing customers. For example, we recently integrated the Lightning Network within the app. So really trying to always be one step ahead of most of competition to provide things that are interesting, that customers want.
Yeah. And y'all are still a pretty, as far as population wise, we're about 30 plus people there.
Yes, 30 people, growing fast. I mean, I've been there for 6 weeks. I'm already hiring my second person. And actually, literally today at noon, I opened a new job on LinkedIn as a recruiter job, because we know that we will grow very fast. And as we speak, it was less than 5 hours ago. I have already like 150 different applications that came in the first 5 hours. So there's quite some demand, I have to say, for that. And we expect to roughly double the team by the end of next year. And then once we have that size, we will be able to maintain that size for a much longer period of time and leverage the economies of scale.
Right. Man, that's great to hear. Okay, so let's go into the book, because I know this kind of predates everything you just covered about the company. You were still working for the healthcare company at the time, correct?
Yeah, exactly.
So go ahead and tell us about the book, and how long did it take to write? And this is your first book written?
Yes. So I was already into writing, in the sense, having blogs, and I knew that, I really enjoyed writing. But then when I discovered Bitcoin, as I mentioned, it quickly became an obsession. Started reading everything I could on the topic, listening to every podcast I could. Actually, funny enough, I remember when my son, who was waking up very often in the night, I had to do the night feedings, or I got to do night feedings, I should say. And since it needed to be pitch black, Otherwise, he would wake up and I couldn't, make any noise. So I had my headphones on. It was like, I don't know, midnight or 2 a.m. I was feeding him with a bottle and listening to podcasts, all night long, and often listening much longer than he needed. So he was already asleep and I kept listening so longer and longer. And as I usually do, I like to structure my thoughts. So I structured my thoughts by making notes on everything I was learning. And at some point, I realized, well, actually, I think that would be valuable to a lot more people than just myself. And I structured the notes as how I would structure a book. And then after a while, I thought, okay, now it's probably time to actually go the whole way and write a book about it. And when I was maybe 80% done with the book, I applied to top publishing houses. And when Springer Nature agreed to publish me, I mean, that was quite a step. Springer being one of the biggest publishing houses in the world. So I got the book published with them in June last year.
Wow. And tell the audience about the title. I remember you saying you kind of wanted to change it, but that's not how it works in publishing.
Yeah, exactly. So the title is Understanding Crypto Fundamentals. Despite my very strong Bitcoin only stance, there is the word crypto in the only 3 words of the title. But there was a fair idea behind it. Originally, I thought, look, most people I meet are not particularly interested into Bitcoin only. They're interested into crypto. And only as they learn about crypto assets, they often have their shitcoin phase, and then as they learn, they progress and reach the point where they realize that actually the real value is in Bitcoin, not in anything else, which are nice tools to play with, but it's nothing that will change the world. It's nothing that is genuinely revolutionary. And Bitcoin is the only one that can claim something much bigger than ourselves, something that will absolutely turn the world upside down for the better. And the idea of the title was to get the people interested in crypto and let them decide by themselves that actually Bitcoin is the way forward, rather than telling them look only at Bitcoin, don't look at the rest. I was more open-minded and saying, look, here are the different things, here are the pros and cons, and then they will reach themselves to the conclusion that Bitcoin is the superior asset.
Now, can you explain maybe, because I still have a lot of friends that believe in the use cases and the communities of all these other Solanas and XRPs and doing all this hard work and stuff. What is your typical response to them as they see? And I actually agree with them. I'm like, look, they'll probably, some of these will never die, much like casinos will never die. And you can always play the roulette at casinos, but it'll never be, it'll never free humanity like Bitcoin will. But what is your explanation when you get that people that are invested because they believe in the community and they believe in the tech and the use cases? How do you respond to that?
All right. First thing first, legally speaking, basically any of the other crypto assets than Bitcoin is what is called a security, in the sense that you have an ultimate beneficiary. You had pre-mines, you had you have a paid company behind it, and you have people that can influence the protocol. Even using the word protocol is probably incorrect because it's something proprietary. It's not something neutral. Bitcoin is the only asset that can claim proper decentralization. The only digital asset that can claim proper decentralization, regardless of what any government or company or single person thinks about Bitcoin. They cannot stop it. They cannot censor it. They cannot take it for themselves. They cannot break the protocol. That was not the case all the way, because early in the history of Bitcoin, it was big players could have broken Bitcoin, but now it's definitely way past that point. And Bitcoin, so as I said, Bitcoin is the only one that's properly decentralized. The other ones are not decentralized. Regardless of what they claim, you always have, developers that can completely change how things are working, or owners that can, print more for themselves, or change completely how the fundamental things about how the protocol works to enrich themselves in such a way that they are clearly securities. And I will even gladly make the case that Ethereum is very clearly a security. I mean, they started with a proof of work mechanism, basically saying anybody who puts in the work, so anybody who is ready to spend electricity in order to secure the network, will get rewarded. Now, they changed it by saying the more ETH you have, the more power you have on the network. So the richer you are, the more powerful you are, and on top, since you have a higher likelihood of mining the next block on the Ethereum blockchain, well, you will also get richer. So the rich get richer and more powerful by design. So, and the only fact that the main developer, Vitalik, could change or influence the change for going from proof of work to proof of stake just proves that it has never been decentralized in the first place. And as soon as you're on proof of stake, or a proof of stake like consensus mechanism, you are definitely a security, which, by the way, in the US, if you are not registered as a security, you are what is called an unregistered security, and which is deeply illegal. So, I mean, there are so many problems with that. So that was my first point. Anything else than Bitcoin is basically a security, and therefore is literally illegal, whether it's accepted as such yet or not. It's, you have clear rules, and they do not fulfill securities law. Now, ethically speaking, being a security also has a very strong meaning. Letting people use your token, let's say Ethereum, Solana, or whatever else, knowing that you can influence what the token will be worth, or how the rules behind the token will be in the future. I mean, this is a very clear ethical dilemma and conflict of interest. Bitcoin is the only one that does not have this very strong conflict of interest behind it. Even if I had half of all the Bitcoin in the world, there's nothing I can do to change the consensus mechanism. There's nothing I can do to make Bitcoin worth more unless other people think it's worth more. It's completely separated. My interest in Bitcoin is separated from how Bitcoin works. You cannot say that for Ethereum. If I have many Ethereums, well, I have power over the protocol, and therefore I can change rules so that I will benefit from it. So, it's not only purely a legal topic, it's a very clear ethical dilemma behind it. So, and then you have plenty of other benefits. I mean, Bitcoin is helping in incentivize the development of renewable infrastructure by providing incentive for using renewable energy at places that couldn't make use of this renewable energy before. It's therefore helping millions of people to have access to electricity where they didn't have before. It's helping millions of people under oppressed regimes to finally have access to a money that these oppressive regimes cannot control, cannot censor, cannot steal. And I mean, I have a full chapter going on all the benefits of Bitcoin that go well beyond the purely number goes up theory. So well beyond just, oh, I hold money. It's really something for the world. You are making a step forward, the same way fire was a development for humanity, or the invention of the wheel, or the invention of the double booking accounting system, or internet or aviation, all these stuff that really brought humanity forward to new heights. Well, now we are at the brink of one of the biggest steps for humanity forward. For the first time, we will have proper money, genuinely decentralized, genuinely accessible to all in the entire world without having one entity behind it. So
Right.
genuinely pure money, separated from any government, separated from any corporate. This has so wide-ranging consequences that people cannot even begin to imagine how the world will be different through Bitcoin in the future.
Yeah, and let me add a little to what you said that I don't think is well understood. If you look at where human flourishing is on a map, it directly maps to where electricity is cheap. If you don't have cheap electricity, you're blasted back to the Stone Ages. And this drastically hurts economies that have super expensive electricity. Even in Europe and Hawaii, they have such a hard time competing with industries that are built around 8 and 9 and 10 cent a kilowatt hour, which is where we have in Louisiana. We're like right on the core of where energy is produced. Well, you can't compete with somebody producing electricity if they're building 1,000 megawatt plant, but you can't convince anyone to build 1,000 megawatt plant in the middle of nowhere where there's no population and no promise of industry. In come Bitcoin, and they can drop sea cans of miners anywhere on earth where there's a waterfall in the middle of the jungle, and in 10 minutes sell all the electricity that you just produced on the open market and have $1 trillion in liquidity, or a lot of liquidity. So if you care about human flourishing, and this is a humanitarian issue, that now you can bring electricity to the world, and you can be cash flowing these big infrastructure projects on day one. Like literally before they're finished, the Bitcoin mines can be sitting there ready to consume 100% of that electricity. So as a humanity, if you are at all care about the little starving children in Africa kind of thing, Bitcoin is the best thing we've ever had to bring human flourishing into the middle of nowhere. So I'm so glad you hit on that one topic. That one I'm super passionate about because I'm a master electrician by trade. So I understand how electricity brings modern advancements in technology to all of us. I mean, lose your power for a day if you're in a modern country and see where you are. It's amazing how you're literally blasted back 100 years ago. All right. So about this book, where did I guess give us a commercial for the book.
All right.
Why should we read your book?
I'm not a salesperson, so I will gladly admit some things. There are plenty of fantastic books in the Bitcoin space. I could recommend dozens of them. I think that my book, nevertheless, adds some things to the literature that does not exist elsewhere, and is indeed appropriate for some readers. It will give you a more up-to-date overview of the financial reason behind Bitcoin. So all of types of financial risk management. So all financial risk management metrics, all valuation methods behind Bitcoin. This is probably the most up-to-date book on the topic by far. It also has a full chapter on complementary currencies, which is not something that I have found in any other Bitcoin book, and I've been looking for that very intensely. So
what does that mean? Recurrencies.
So about 20 years ago, there was a topic that was becoming mainstream would be an overstatement, but coming out of the shadows at least, the fact that having multiple currencies were working in parallel in an economy, how this can stabilize the economy and enable the whole corresponding country or economy to flourish much better than any neighboring country. So, and you have plenty of examples in history, one of which is Switzerland, where you have the biggest and longest surviving complementary currency network called the Wir. So the Wir, or Wirtschaftsring in German, is a corporate currency that corporates can use with each other in order to settle debits and credits instantly, and they can use that in parallel to the Swiss francs. And the existence of this currency has been shown in literature to be probably the main factor explaining the stability that Switzerland has known over the last 100 years or so. Because when the traditional economy goes down, you will have these complementary network. The usage of these complementary network will go up in such a way that it will smooth the ebbs and flows of the economy, so that the economy does not crash hard and does not have irrational exuberance afterwards, and so that you have normal people and businesses that survive much longer. They have a much better resilience. So I have a full chapter on this topic, how that makes absolute sense for the world and for economies. Now, as you can imagine, that's not exactly what governments and mainstream economics like to push for. That, oh, look, if you use this alternative network that we have no control over, you will be better off and that will be good for your economy. As you can imagine, that's not exactly the mainstream narrative coming from those in control. But the evidence, empirical evidence, is very heavily showing that it is the case. And now, I think that my book was the first one, and to my knowledge, the only one making the parallel between how this concept combined with Bitcoin can really mean something for the world, something that you probably do not find anywhere else in literature. So
Now,
Mhm.
So I was going to make a small analogy, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Chinese government somewhat realized that if they did not allow a certain degree of global trade and capitalism and entrepreneurship uncontrolled to exist within their country, that they would never really pull themselves out of poverty, which is why they kind of wrote this, they kind of drew this economic zone around Shenzhen and said, go do business with the world. And the way you described this multiple currencies, it's like, yeah, it isn't that great for your country because you can't really control it, but they will generate so much wealth, which then you could maybe tax the wealth of their homes and the wealth of their possessions, that the country that really embraces Bitcoin for its population, though they might not be able to control Bitcoin, they still own the land that they built, that they live on. And I think China realized the same thing, that if we have this, walled garden and no one can do business with China, then we're just going to get passed up. I feel like the same thing is happening for Bitcoin nation state adoption, that if the first countries that truly embrace Bitcoin for their citizens, they're just going to rise to the top. Do you see that as well, or is that kind of what you're saying?
There are some elements that where you can make parallels there. Indeed, any reasonable government would want its population to be wealthier rather than poorer. And Bitcoin is gonna make the population wealthier. So any reasonable government would be actually embracing it and even pushing it to its population. That's clearly what El Salvador was doing. Not only using it as strategic national reserve, but also pushing it to the population. Giving Bitcoin to every person, El Salvadorian, and ensuring that there is a network so that it can be used within the country. Now, we can criticize how that was implemented and the quality of the Shiva wallet that they used, but at least they very much had the right ambition there. And indeed, El Salvador has been rising, like skyrocketing in terms of prosperity since they adopted the Bitcoin standard about 2 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I see that as well. And then I love how Michael Saylor made the comparison at his speech in Nashville. He kind of gave, here's the roadmap for a nation state. Here's the roadmap for maybe a city. Here's the roadmap for a publicly traded company, an individual. And I think it across the board, the different entities that can bring Bitcoin as a treasury reserve asset or some way to hold the value are going to just simply outpace those that are holding something that's just losing value. And so you're both running a city, running a country, running a company. Like we're all going to keep doing that, running a family. But how do you compete with someone who what their winnings just hold still while your winnings are just falling through your fingertips? And I think this is the one that those that figure it out first in all categories are just going to be the ones that are last. It's kind of going to be like a last man standing, I think.
Yep, precisely. Which actually is very interesting from the perspective of valuation methods, which is also one of the big parts of my book. So I present maybe 10 different valuation methods for Bitcoin. But at the end of the day, when you have a big nation state deciding to adopt Bitcoin, I mean, none of the models make sense. There's not one. I mean, when you don't even need the US or China or the European Union to adopt Bitcoin. Even when you have much smaller countries that are rather wealthy, I don't know, Qatar or these kind of countries that have a very significant sovereign wealth fund that decide to put even 1% of their assets in Bitcoin and who have the ability to print money in order to buy Bitcoin, I mean, the price will just do stuff that are ridiculous. I mean, it will add 1 0 or 2 zeros almost overnight. And you will have people who were there before and people who were there after. And many people will say you were just lucky, while some people have spent thousands of hours learning about it and preparing themselves and their family to go through this massive change, and others decided to ignore the new reality.
Yeah, I think there's kind of three levels of maybe three epochs. You've got the one where you've just got the nerds and the coders, individuals, the techies, and it's really been their show this whole time until I would say the Michael Saylor era, where wealthy individuals, companies, bigger checkbooks, investment firms, and I think that's where we're at right now. But the nation state, printing press, adoption is I don't think has woken up yet. I mean, I think El Salvador is maybe just a slight movement of that, but we're talking about a super tiny country. I was trying to explain this to people on my show the other day. I'm like, if you look at the city of Dallas, which is one of my clients, the city of Dallas is a massive $400 billion economy, and it's just one U.S. city. It's a big one. But if you compare that to El Salvador, it's like a tenth of the size. So the mayor of Dallas wields 10 times the economy as the president of the country of El Salvador. And so although any move in a sovereign nation is a great move, no major sovereign nation has, like you said, even moved an insignificant 0.5% or 0.1%. And when they do, I think you're like you said, there's going to be a significant before and after. Kind of like, there's before Michael Saylor, which brought in the ETFs and BlackRocks and pension funds. And then there's after that. And I think we've just starting to feel that. I don't think we've even gotten close to feeling what it feels like when a nation state adopts Bitcoin.
No, especially with consequences, it's a cascade effect. Imagine you have China adopting it, like seriously adopting it. Do you think the US wants to stay on the side? I mean, they will not let China win that battle, so they will step in very quickly, and then you will Russia, who will also not want to stay on the sidelines, and so it will be when you have a few proper nation states, so let's say of meaningful size, adopting it, then it will very quickly become a very interesting part of history.
And when you say proper nation state, this is how I describe a proper nation state. a nation state that has no problem building 1,000 megawatt electrical generators, nuclear, hydro. It's got to be one of those. And when you look at the infrastructure might of China and Russia, or even India, or some of these nations to build massive electricity projects, those are going to be the ones that come in. I'm not talking about these. And actually, Bukele talks about this in his interview with Tucker Carlson. He said, we are not one of these superpowers. We're just a tiny little state. We don't have the ability to exist on our own. We actually need import. Some of these other countries like Russia and China, they've got everything within their borders. And that's what I like when you describe nation state adoptions. That to me, that's almost a different level. And I think it's coming. Like all of the BRIC nations, it would seem like the BRIC nations would be the first group of nations to recognize Bitcoin as an alternative to the U.S. dollar and gold. What would you say about that?
Yeah, clearly. Now, any nation state still sorry, any nation state still has conflict of interest if they have the ability to print their own money and to have their population using their own money. This is still an enormous incentive, and they will want to keep that power. But if that power is kind of losing value anyway, because other countries are adopting Bitcoin, and then you can choose either to adopt it and maybe be able to compete with them, or slide into irrelevance because you're not adopting it, then indeed you're much better off adopting it. And these countries who are currently not the country with the leading currency in the world, they have a much stronger incentive even than the US to adopt that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so you would say that your book is really good for, and this is probably because of your personal background, but it's really good for those that want to understand the finance, the financial models, the investors, the CFOs, because you're kind of speaking to, that's your population that you've been with for, like you said, 15 years.
Indeed. So I'm indeed talking that language, and that will probably speak to the heart of the people with a finance background or with economic background. While at the same time, I wrote the book in a way that it can be understood by anybody without any strong background in finance or economics. A friend of mine, he studied navigation. He's working on cruise ships, and he loved it. And you do not need to have had finance classes or economics classes to be able to fully understand the book. Now, will you replicate the model and try to establish new financial risk management methods? No, he won't be in that category. And I have some chapters that go more towards that direction, and institutional investors who want to see that, they will also find this kind of information, but you don't have to. So I try to really bring something for all kind of readers, and especially bring something to the Bitcoin literature that did not exist before. It's not just one more book about Bitcoin. It's something different, something new, and something that is hopefully really making a difference for the existing literature.
Fantastic. And now, is this your last book? Are you writing another one, or where are you?
Writing a book is a big endeavor. I've done a few, so I've done an Ironman, I've done, several masters and so on. Those are all nice achievements, but writing a book is really exhausting, takes an enormous amount of time. And now that I have 2 young children at home, plus a very demanding job, I'm afraid that won't be something that I will do now in the coming couple of years, at least.
Right.
Maybe in the future, we never know. I've been thinking quite a lot of updating the book, because things are evolving so fast. It's incredible, and it was published just a year ago, and I still see plenty of things that could be further developed and looked into.
Yeah.
So maybe at some point I will do an update of the book, but for now I will focus on my job at Relay, focus on the kids at home, and see where life is bringing me with this focus.
Well, I'd love to do this interview again with another financial guy that I met, Rajat. He's big on X, and he's kind of in your area, neck of the woods, as far as finance. I'd love to see y'all go back and forth and just bounce ideas off of one another, because I think the community that y'all are speaking to is very new and was previously, and when I say previously, just a few months ago, 6 months ago, was so skeptical. You'd get laughed off the block if you
Yes,
tried to have a conversation with someone that is managing money, actively managing money, and you mentioned the word Bitcoin. That was pretty much the end of the conversation. And now it's like, I don't know if it's the political, the politics, and same thing with politicians. It seems like there's been they go from, we can't even mention Bitcoin, to how hard can we date Bitcoin overnight? I think
this is exactly it. I mean, I've been a speaker at several events, including in front of the CFA Institute, so all hardcore finance people, or at the inside MBA community. And you have people that are so skeptical. They're like, yeah, but is that serious? They are still 10 years back, or they're still looking at Bitcoin as if it was 2011, where the risks were extremely high, where it was not serious enough to be considered a real financial asset. And yeah, they just do not understand the pace at which things are evolving. But the same way in the early 90s, from what I've been told, if you were talking about the internet, it was looked at as something for nerds and something that would never take on. And how wrong people have been on that topics. Even the Nobel Prize of Economics, Paul Krugman, famously said that in a few years it will be obvious that the invention of the internet is no bigger than the invention of the fax machine. I think he said that in like 97 or something. How wrong can you be? And we're talking here about people that were, who ultimately became Nobel Prize of Economics. And I think we are going through the exact same phase, where people who are today loudly advocating against Bitcoin, just because they haven't spent more than 2 hours trying to learn about it, they will turn around and realize how wrong they were. And you have some previously proud skeptics that completely changed their mind. I mean, Michael Saylor was a proud skeptic at the time. He even famously posted on Twitter that the days of Bitcoins are numbered. Larry Fink from BlackRock was saying that Bitcoin was a joke, basically.
How big, when Larry Fink came, did his 360, how big was that, or 180? How big was that for your industry? Because he's kind of like the peak of financial investors.
Yeah.
That had to have sent ripples through your industry, huh?
I thought it would. I knew at the time. So to be honest, that's really the moment where I realized, okay, now I need to go all in. Because when you had Larry Fink completely changing, I realized, okay, now we are in a new era. Now it's really that was in last summer, so just over a year ago. Interestingly, the Bitcoin price didn't move, so most people ignored it. And and I was talking about it with several seriously senior people, head of treasury of the companies where I've been working. So, and the answers I received, well, first they were interested into trying to understand why, but then they were like, well, but the head of JP Morgan is still saying that it's completely useless. He must know, right? It cannot, he wouldn't say that if it was as revolutionary as you say. And yeah, I mean, as they say, everybody will get Bitcoin at the price they deserve.
Right. Well, what do you think the problem is, Thomas, for people not being able to recognize disruption? They just think they look at a disruptor like a competitor, like as if the car was competing with the horse. It wasn't competing with the horse. It was totally destroying the horse industry, much like the electricity destroyed the whaling industry, or the internet or like, I don't know if you remember, y'all probably didn't have Blockbuster. Americans, we had this thing where you would rent videotapes,
I've heard about it.
Blockbuster.
Yeah.
Yes. And then you probably didn't look at Netflix as the thing that was going to wipe out and destroy it. But disruption just is not well noticed by the general population. And they don't look at Bitcoin as a disruptor. They just look at it as a speculative investment or maybe a competitor. I don't think they understand Bitcoin's not here to compete. It's here to completely disrupt.
Exactly. You need to change your mind completely. The perspective in your mind needs to change. And I have to say, it's not something easy to do, and it's not something that goes fast. I mean, it took me maybe hundreds of hours of spending into learning about Bitcoin before really getting my head around the fact that I couldn't even begin to grasp how impactful that was going to be. Just the fact that people were always asking, oh, so if you invest in Bitcoin, when do you get out? When do you cash out? And trying to make them understand that buying Bitcoin is cashing out. That's the exit strategy. Like, no, but no, that's your entry strategy. What is your exit strategy? No. Buying Bitcoin is your exit strategy. And,
Right.
it's just putting things upside down and people don't get it. But by the time you get it, you are probably already all in.
Yeah, it's kind of like saying, when I get off the Titanic, so when do we get back on the boat so I can go change for tonight's event? Like, no, you don't understand. Boat's going down. Get off. That's crazy. Well, look, man, I want to do this again. I'm going to try to schedule it maybe in a month or so. We'll get our calendars together, and I want to get you and Rajat on the same one, maybe do a panel. And I'd love to hear y'all go back and forth. And if you have any updates for your books, I'm sure in a month so much stuff will happen. But I've really enjoyed this. I can't believe it's already been over an hour for us.
No, I would love that. And indeed, as you're saying, I think the coming month will be pretty wild. I mean, that's my expectation. As you may know, the 4 months before political elections in the US, the VIX index, so the volatility index for the stock market, is going crazy. So the volatility is increasing enormously. And when volatility of the stock market increases, volatility of Bitcoin increases as well, because people just don't know what to do and they buy and sell like crazy. And so I think there will be enormous flows of volatility in the coming few months. And that also means opportunities. And I think we will hear a lot more about Bitcoin until at least the November election. And then let's see. Then the bull run can finally resume, hopefully.
That's it. That's right. I mean, Bitcoin's on sale right now. I mean, especially prior to the election. If Trump and Kennedy get in with all their ideas about how they're going to leverage or use Bitcoin, it's just creating such a buzz. And I would say this, and maybe you can speak on this before we head out, but I think Trump did one thing above all things that he's done. He has cleared the way for Bitcoin conversations to actually be had. Whereas before, if you were a Bitcoiner trying to speak to fill in the blank anyone that doesn't understand it, it was very difficult to have a meaningful conversation. And now I notice that people that were former skeptics are coming to ask me, tell me a little bit more. And I actually credit that to someone like Trump that opened the conversation for us. Now we still got to have the conversations, right? And they still have to go spend their 100 or 1,000 hours like we had to do to understand it. But it was almost like there was a stone wall. Did you have that similar experience?
Absolutely.
Like conversations have been a lot easier.
Absolutely. I mean, I don't want to say too much good stuff about Trump because his speech in Nashville was, I think, absolutely terrible. He does not get much, if anything at all, about Bitcoin. But at the very least, he understood that it's a topic for many people, and he's willing to address it and to discuss it. And he has started to put the first foot in the rabbit hole. I mean, he's nowhere near as deep as Kennedy is on Bitcoin. I mean, he's a real Bitcoiner. He really got it. You could feel from his speech that he really knows what he's talking about there. Trump is nowhere near that, but at the very least, he's opening the conversation. And as you're saying, you have hundreds of millions of people that are now asking themselves for the first time, hey, what is this thing? And yeah, even if only a few % of them end up becoming Bitcoiner in the coming year or so, that will still make quite some move.
Yeah, and I'll say this to anyone listening: look, please be patient with Trump and other presidents and mayors and CEOs and CFOs. If they haven't spent the 100 hours there, it's like blaming a child for not being able to drive. I'm like, give him some time behind the wheel. You need experience. All of us had to put in 100 to 400 hours to get to where we're at. And these men and women are just on hour number 10. They're going to be lost. But I can't wait to see where, a year from now, all of their progression, and Michael Saylor was the same way. I watched him early in his journey, compared that to where he is right now is night and day. And I don't mean when he was negative about Bitcoin. I mean when he actually started to embrace it. Somebody way down the rabbit hole just speaks differently. And I speak to guys like you and other guys that are actually building this stuff, and I feel like I'm in kindergarten when I understand Bitcoin. I don't really understand it on a technical level like some of the developers do. Have you ever been to any of those technical bit dev meetings? Have you attended
I don't need to go there to know that it's just way over my head.
I'm so glad you said that.
I mean, Bitcoin has so many facets, and just being able to know one of them is already enormous. So I'm trying to get a little bit on the technicals, a little bit on the mining, on the electricity behind it, and so on. But yeah, clearly my perspective on Bitcoin is economics and finance, and what does it mean for the world from that perspective. And I think just this already took me 1,200 hours or something to write the book. So yeah, you cannot be a master in everything, but luckily we are not alone. We are an army of Bitcoiners, and together we are making this entire system extremely strong and exceptionally resilient.
Fantastic. That was a great close there. Well, Thomas, man, it's been great talking to you. Let's do this again. And any final words for the audience?
Well, first of all, pleasure was mine. Thank you for the invite. Yeah, a lot of people just say buy Bitcoin. No, don't say buy Bitcoin to people. Tell them to learn about Bitcoin. If you say buy Bitcoin, you're basically telling them to do something without understanding it. That's not the point. They will have paper hands, even if they do, which most people won't, they will have paper hands, and they are not going to do anything with it. Tell them to learn about Bitcoin, and then they will be orange pilling other people. So learn about Bitcoin.
Fantastic. Great advice. All right. Well, have an awesome week. And I look forward to our next interview. And thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you. See you soon.
Appreciate it, Thomas.
Bye bye.
All right. So that was Thomas. And he is just an amazing guy. I met at the Bitcoin conference Miami. We have stayed in touch off and on since then. And so one of the great minds that's building a part of Bitcoin, at least the knowledge base of Bitcoin for people in the world of finance. So if you're managing money, if you're a CFO, and you have these financial backgrounds, he has written a book that really speaks your language and understands it at a deep level. And so if you have anyone in your life, or you have a financial advisor and you've asked them about Bitcoin, and they kind of look at you with this blank stare, or they think they know a little bit about it, or they've done a little bit that their company requires to be able to speak on Bitcoin, it may be good to give them Thomas's book so that they can have a much deeper understanding from someone in their industry that has gone way down that rabbit hole. I've just started reading his book. I wanted to finish his book before this interview, but I wasn't able to because of travel. So hopefully by the next time I interview him and I bring Rajat on stage, we'll be able to have a much more, maybe I can participate in the conversation a lot more, because they start using a lot of these financial terms. That's obviously not my background. And it kind of gets above and beyond how I can be able to participate in the conversation. So anyway, Craig LeBlanc, the doorman. Sorry, I've been taking a little break from Twitter and Bitcoin, but I set this interview up months ago, and he's a close friend of mine, and so I really wanted to stay on this one. But I'm going to start doing more of these, I promise, and I'm going to try to get back to my Sunday Philosophy Sunday show. Thank you all so much for reaching out to me, checking in on me, making sure I was good and okay. Everything's fine. I've just got a lot of stuff going on in life, and I'm relaunching a business that I had just because, I want to fiat mine for a little bit. I haven't been fiat mining in 15 months. So I've just been kind of taking a break from life. And so I'm getting back into that. But thank you all so much for joining us today. Again, this is Craig LeBlanc, the doorman. Please, please follow Thomas on X for any of his content and stuff. Really brilliant guy. Great to follow. Love you guys. Let's go stack some sats. Have a great week. Bye.
Inflation is stealing your purchasing power, but what if there was a way to fight back? Enter Bitcoin, the digital currency that empowers you to take control of your wealth. Ever wondered why your money doesn't stretch as far as it used to? At the Daily Bitcoin Podcast, we educate, inform, and inspire. From expert interviews to breaking news, we bring you everything you need to stay ahead in the Bitcoin community. Market updates, expert insights, real-world use cases, and practical tips to navigate the Bitcoin economy. So whether you're a seasoned Bitcoin investor or just getting started, this is your daily dose of Bitcoin wisdom. Don't miss out. Subscribe now, hit that bell icon, and let's break free from the chains of inflation, one Bitcoin at a time. The Daily Bitcoin Podcast, your gateway to financial freedom.